On this episode of Mindshift, we sit down with our dear friend, Edwin Arroyave, who's a CEO and founder, a father, a friend, and someone that we dearly, dearly love and respect. One of the cool things that we sit down and talk about is his journey from immigrating to the US, into Los Angeles, into how he became a man and how he became someone who is incredibly successful and all of the character that it takes to get there. He is someone that I know dearly, I love dearly, and I know really well, and someone that I would trust with my life. This episode is special to us, one, because Edwin decides to go there. We ask him big questions and he gives us big answers. And it's one of my favorite conversations that we did at the conference at the arena, which we are doing again next October 11th and 12th here in Los Angeles, and hopefully in this exact same room. And you can register now. The link will be in the bio of this episode, and we invite you to join us. But this episode is really special. We actually gave Edwin the Man in the Arena Award, the very first, the inaugural award, which is basically an award we give to a man or a woman who we feel lives an exemplary life, a life of heroic nature, a life of sacrifice and generosity, someone who leads his family and his company and his world well. We love Edwin, and we believe you will too. Go check this out. Enjoy this episode.
Love all the people here. I'm excited about it. An honor to be here.
It's an honor to have you.
Thank you.
I'm a big fan of yours. Big fan of yours.
I'm a big fan of yours.
I met a young guy outside who had an amazing little company called Embrace Your Fears. And he came up and said hi and gave me a hug. And I was like, how did you get here? And he said, I DM'd Edwin.
Yeah.
And I just think, and I said,
I love his hustle. Where's William? Yeah, I love your hustle, William.
Love your hustle. He has an amazing story. And I'm always just so surprised that you check your DMs. But you really do. And
I do check my DMs.
There's a lot of guys that work for you and that work with you that you've met through that channel. And I find it so interesting.
A lot of superstars I've met through that channel.
Yeah.
So
detail fill in for me. Did you guys know each other?
No, we met through internet.
And he DM'd you as a total stranger.
Yes.
So you're an incredibly busy person.
Yeah.
So what made you decide to respond to a stranger's DM?
Because I love people that have dreams. I love people that have God-sized dreams.
That's so good. I love that.
It reminds me of myself.
I love that.
And then you invited him to the arena.
Yeah, I was like, man, you got to come here, man. And he's in the fashion business. So I was like, Lorenzo's going to speak. I'm like, if you were ever going to come to something, this is when you want to come to.
You mean you didn't invite him to come hear you speak?
Yeah. He's probably seen some of my stuff before.
That's awesome. I love that. It's great to have you here with us, too. That's beautiful. Part of what I want to do in this particular session is I would love for you to share your story.
Okay. Yeah.
And a lot of the arena community, some of you know you a bit, and some of them you'll be new to them.
Yeah.
And I love your story.
Thank you.
But we don't have time to go through all of it in the level of detail, so we're going to have to basically
chunk it up.
Photographic moments of your story.
Okay, cool. It's a long story.
Yeah, give them a quick backstory of your family's history, where you come from.
Okay.
And go up to 14.
Okay, cool. So I was born in Bogota, Colombia. My parents...
Come on.
I guess we got some Colombia people here. And my parents, sister, and I came to the United States in search of that American dream. However, that American dream quickly became an American nightmare because 2 weeks after coming to the U.S., our home got raided by law enforcement. And that day, both of my parents went to jail. My sister and I ended up at this foster home, actually in Hollywood. And about 8 months later, my parents get acquitted of all charges. And my sister and I are thinking that this nightmare is over. However, the nightmare was just beginning because every year after that, our home would get raided again. And my dad would fly to Colombia, come back 6 months later. And that happened for about 4 years. And then finally, when I was 10 years old, our home got raided one last time. And this time, they were able to get my dad. And, they took him, and the cops were nice enough to allow me to speak to him. And his words to me that day were, son, you need to become the man of the house. And my dad was my hero. He still is my hero. And I promised him that I would. And now I had two other siblings. And Dad did leave us some money. However, about 3 years later, we ran out of money, and that's how we ended up growing up in the city of Huntington Park, which is not to be confused with Huntington Beach or Hancock Park. Opposites. And but I was lucky enough at 15 years old to get a job working at a call center. And this was not a very ideal job for me because I was very shy and I was very timid. But I quickly got the courage to do this job I did not want to do just out of desperation, because I was tired of seeing my mom not be able to pay for the rent at the end of the month. I was tired of us not being able to eat at the end of the month because we were on food stamps. I was tired of my siblings, mother and I, just living in this tiny little bedroom without any windows. And finally, I was just tired of roaches waking me up in the middle of the night. So the avoidance of pain caused me to take action towards something that really demanded more than I thought I was worth. And even though I was a very shy and I was a very timid kid, the one thing I did have going for myself is I was a big dreamer. I had two things going for me. I was a big dreamer. In fact, when I was 12 years old, my mom would go clean offices, and I'd stay home all day. And I would just visualize how one day I was going to make $100,000 a year. And I gave myself a deadline. I'm going to do that thing by the time I'm 21 years old. And the second thing was that I always felt like God was with me. And the reason I felt that was because one of the great things my mom did for me, still does, is she always prays over me. This morning, she prayed over me. And she always told me how I was born to do something great. She always told me how one day I was going to be so successful that I'd be on stages talking about my success and how that's linked up to my faith. So I just had this confidence, and sure enough, so now I'm 15 years old, and I get this job at the call center, and I didn't have any talent, so I thought to myself, well, I took this mind shift, and I took on the mindset of an overachiever, and I became obsessed with repetition. I became obsessed with doing the things that most people didn't want to do. I did all the boring stuff, and part of the boring stuff is I just showed up. I showed up 6 days a week. All the talented people didn't show up on Saturday. I was there on Saturdays. They had this leadership development program there, which is what inspired me to do our own at our company, and I wouldn't miss. And then those little things started to get my mind to accept that I deserve more. Because even though they were a little more talented than me, I was like, they're not doing these little things. I know I'm going to eventually get them. And then I remember, a lot of what I've done is just common sense. I went to the top guy at the company who was super cool and top producer. And I just went up to him with my Radio Shack recorder, and I said...
How old are you?
15. And I went up to him with my Radio Shack recorder, and I dated myself on that. Most of you don't know what Radio Shack is. But I said, hey, can you record your presentation for me? He's like, sure. And again, I became obsessed with repetition. I literally listened to his presentation. I wrote it down word for word, and I learned it verbatim. And I took on his confidence, because now, man, I'm sounding like this. I'm saying exactly what he's saying. I'm sounding just like him. I guess I'm going to be just as good as him. And then again, I just became obsessed with repetition. I would role play all the time. And even though I was a very shy and timid kid, when you know what you're doing, where you're going, and why you're doing it, you operate out of certainty. And when you operate out of certainty, your enthusiasm naturally comes out. And I became great at sales. And it wasn't really, it's not that I had any sales tactics. I was convinced. I had this conviction. And, people don't have to believe what you're saying. They have to believe you believe what you're saying. And yeah, that was that. And then at 18 years old, sure enough, I became the youngest manager in company history. But
so how old were you when you became the youngest manager?
18. But not because I was most...
Why were you so slow? It took you so long to hit these different plateaus.
Right? But so funny thing. So I wanted to make $100,000 by the age of 21. So at 15 years old, I just thought to myself, well, if I'm going to make $100,000 by the age of 21, then I guess I better become the manager at the age of 18. And then I just focused on the only two things that I could focus on, which was my activity and my attitude. And that's where, again, I just started outworking everyone. And then at 18 years old, not because I was the most deserving, but the 6 people that were way more talented than I was, they all got fired for doing things they shouldn't have been doing, and that's kind of how I got my shot. And that was a big moment in my life because it was the first time that I truly began to believe in myself. And the reason that's important is that I think other than hope, which is, you know, having the God-sized dreams to want to do big things and the desire to want to do something big, and other than faith, I think you need to believe in yourself. And that's because you could only receive what your mind can accept. And that's why I loved all the conversations we've been having, because it's around that, right? And in life, you will experience that which you are deeply convinced. And at 18 years old, I started to believe in my heart that I was worth $100,000 a year. Even though I wasn't necessarily making it, I actually felt it because I didn't see no other 18-year-old at the time doing what I was doing. So, you know, the way to kind of put that for you guys is that we all have this unlimited potential, right? We all have these gifts that God has given us, that He's placed in our hearts, and we just have to unlock them. But what happens is your potential is limited to where you're at today, right? Meaning at 15 years old, sure, I dreamt that I'd be where I'm at today, but I didn't believe it. But at 18 years old, when I was able to accomplish that, it now unlocked a new level of belief, right? And it untapped this whole new level. And then when I was 21 years old, so now at 18 years old, I become the manager. I become the right hand of the VP of sales. That's why association is so important. And 3 years later, he comes into my office and he says, Edwin, I'm going to resign and I'm going to start this home security company. And he says to me, I can't guarantee you the $70,000 a year that you make here, but if you make this work, you can possibly double, triple, quadruple what you make here. And what I've noticed is you don't have to be that smart to be successful. You just have to have common sense and drive. And that's exactly, so the first thing I said to myself was, this guy's making $250,000 a year and he's resigning because he thinks he could make $1 million in this untapped market. I'm like, well, that sounds reasonable. The second thing I thought was, man, if this guy's willing to mentor me how to start a company from the ground up, I'm like, this is the mentorship I've been looking for all my life. And then lastly, I had these huge dreams. You know, I promised my dad at 10 years old that when he'd get out of jail, he'd never have to work a day in his life because I didn't want him to get back into the industry that landed him in jail. And then I promised my mom that one day I was going to buy her dream house. And then I always had these huge, audacious goals. And, you know, I was that kid that would ditch school my junior and senior year, which is probably why I ended up with a 1.8 GPA. But I would go to Rodeo Drive, and I would go to Beverly Hills, and I would go to Hollywood Hills, and I would just daydream all day and visualize. I'm like, this is where I belong. This is where I need to be. And I just became obsessed. I remember looking at homes, and I was like, man, one day I'm going to get a house on the edge of the hill that overlooks the whole city. One day I'm going to have a house that's on the beach, that's on the sand, and that's all I thought about. I became obsessed with all that stuff. And then again, I used common sense. I said, is $70,000 a year going to make those dreams happen? And the answer was clearly no. And then one of the ways that you eliminate fear is by looking at the worst case scenario. So at that point, even though I was making $70,000 a year, I now moved from Huntington Park to Southgate, which is a little better neighborhood. Not to get any of my HP people pissed, but it was a little bit of a better neighborhood, but I was still only a mile away from Watts. So I thought to myself, if I fail miserably, I end up in the projects of Watts, which is not that much different than that little apartment that I grew up in. But man, if I make this work, I can make all my dreams happen. It's part of the big time. And I took the plunge, and I think the purpose of a goal is not necessarily to accomplish it, but it's to become the person that actually attempts it. See, in order to believe something in your heart, you have to experience it. And the only way you could experience something like that is by stepping into the to the arena of uncertainty and take on something that demands more than you think you're worth. And when you experience it, now you get a new level of identity, which then untaps a new level of identity. So that's when I took the plunge. And then we started Skyline Security. It'll be 25 years in February.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I have kind of a cliffhanger question for you because you're making $70,000 a year. Then you leave for the potential 3 times more.
Yes.
Did you actually make $70,000 the first year you left?
So I made $150,000 that year.
So you immediately doubled.
I immediately doubled, yes.
That's pretty incredible.
Yes.
And how old were you?
I was 21 years old.
So when you were 21, you achieved your goal of making $100,000 a year. Well, you overachieved.
Yeah. And I often say that I got tricked into success because not knowing any better, the first 10 days, I didn't sell anything. And the reason I didn't sell anything was because I was still working at the other company. So I had convinced my seniors at the time to allow me to change my schedule. So what happened is I was working from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the call center, and I was still making my $1,300 a week, and then I'd work from 4 to 10 at my business. And I didn't get any sales, but when I looked at my brother-in-law at the time, he was doing 2 a day. And what I realized was that I had 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and I wasn't all in, and he was all in. And I said to myself, how is this guy getting 2 deals a day if I trained him at the company? I know I should be just as good as he is. So I resigned. So 10 days later, I resigned from that position, and then all of a sudden, what I couldn't remember in 10 days, I memorized in a weekend. And that first day I came out and I got 5 sales in 1 day. I made $1,500 in a day. And I remember I couldn't sleep that night because I just started dreaming of like, man, imagine if I do this for 29 more days. And I just became excited to go to work. And then that week I ended up making about $6,000. And one of the great things that I did at the time was, not knowing any better, I'm like, I'm going to go to an open house because I want to buy my mom her house. This is what I told her that I was going to do. And I realized going to the open house that you only need to come up with 3% down. And I was like, wait a minute, all I got to come up is with $12,000 to get this house? They're like, yeah. And then all I have to pay is $1,400 a month? They're like, yeah. I'm like, I can make $1,400 in a day. And then I have 29 more days to save. And then literally, I just reverse engineered everything. And I knew my bills were $1,000 a week because my bills were $4,000. I knew that I needed to pay the IRS and I needed to have savings. And then I needed another $1,000 to buy my mom's house because I gave myself a 12-week goal to buy her this house. So then I go pick up Mom from Southgate, and I said, Mom, this house is going to be yours in 90 days. And I said, even if it's not this one, it'll look just like it. And then she starts crying, I start crying, and after I committed to that, it just was not going to happen. It was going to happen. And it's every time I wanted to quit at 8 o'clock, I just kept thinking of her cleaning these offices, and I kept thinking back all the arguments that she had with my dad, how we couldn't have a house, and I was just like, I'm not going to stop. And there was so many times that I got a deal at 10 o'clock, and what that did is it gave me confidence, right? And every time I emptied the tank, that's where everything was created. And I got so much confidence from that, because the reason people don't buy from you is because you look desperate. But eventually, if you've experienced if you've had results and you've experienced those results, you just know it's a matter of time, and now you don't look desperate anymore. And because I knew what I was working for, I was able to achieve it. I think that week that I made $6,000, if I would have not figured out what I wanted, then the only thing I knew would have been my bills. And that's what I would have gotten. So the next 3 weeks, I wouldn't have had the same urgency. So like one of my I've always put myself in these pressure situations that increase my urgency level. See, I think low stress is low performance. And I've always wanted to leverage the most amount of pressure on me so
Sorry,
that...
I had to pause here because Aaron says I create a lot of stress.
I'm 35 going on 72 right today.
And I just wanted to pause here so he could thank me for his high performance.
No, I just...
Yeah.
Not high stress.
So here's the disclaimer to that. Like, if you're not used to keeping the promises that you make to yourself, then you will fold under pressure. So the way you start doing it is just start getting some little wins under your belt and keep the promises you make to yourself, because confidence is everything. Belief drives everything. And what happens is every time you don't keep a promise that you make to yourself, you think no one is watching, but your subconscious mind is. And your subconscious mind will always prove itself correct.
So let's take a little survey. How many of you in the last 3 months know you have a promise that you made to yourself that you have not kept? Okay, keep talking, Edwin.
Just gonna get some water.
They need some water too right now.
Yeah. So what happens is doubt is the killer of everything, right? And when you don't keep the promises you make to yourself, what happens is your subconscious mind keeps a tab on it, right? So even though consciously you'll say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to be the top sales guy in the company, the problem is your subconscious mind doesn't believe it. And because it doesn't believe it, it'll start making excuses, and you'll start to self-sabotage yourself to come back to what you really think you're worth. And the good news is once you become aware of it, you can change it, because that's the thing. I mean, that's the beauty about, mind shift, is that it gives you awareness, because you can't change something that you're not aware of. But once you become aware of it, you can change it. And one of the things I love about keeping the promises that you make to yourself is that you become a person of truth. And if you're created in God's image, then you should be able to speak things into existence. But in order to do that, you got to be about truth. And when you can get your subconscious mind to align with your conscious mind, you'll start to attract all the right people to show up to make the impossible possible. But that only happens when you keep those promises that you make to yourself. And my life it's just all about the right people showing up.
It's amazing. You talked about unlocking those people that you will find in life and that will be drawn to you in order to unlock the next stage of whether it's performance or your business. Are there a few could you highlight a few people along the journey that you've discovered, and how you discovered them, and how that's,
Like mentors?
Mentors, or even people that you've mentored, or doors you've opened, doors that have been opened for you?
Yeah, here's why I think personal development is so important, and why I think the arena is so important, is a lot of my success, other than my faith, came about because that call center that I worked for, before we'd get on the phones, they'd give us leadership training for an hour. So I did that for 6 years, every day, an hour a day, no matter what, that's what we did. Now, at 21 years old, when I started my own company, like a dummy, I stopped working on my mind. And I didn't work on my mindset for about 20 years. And what happens is when you don't do something for a long time, you start to dislike it. And the reason I didn't want to work on my mind was because I didn't want to get reminded that I wasn't very smart, because I had this self-limiting belief that I wasn't smart because I graduated with a 1.8 GPA, and the school system made me believe that I wasn't smart. So as my business started growing, I had 17 years of nothing but success. And then finally 2016 comes around, and the company's making so much money now that I can't accept the money that I'm making. So all of a sudden, I start to self-sabotage. And I didn't want to, I think I maybe had 2 meetings the entire year. And then I started because I had so much time in my hands, because the inner voice kept telling me, oh, people are going to find out you're not that smart. People are going to find out that you've been getting lucky this entire time. Oh, and by the way, you're 40, so this is around the same time your dad lost everything. This is when you're going to lose everything. But I knew what the problem was, because something in my heart was telling me, you need to start working on your mind again. You need to start working on your mind again. So I picked up a book for the first time in 20 years. The book was called 10X by Grant Cardone. And then I remember, at first I couldn't read it. So then I'm like, all right, let's get the audio version. I couldn't retain it either. So then I literally wrote 75% of the book out. I'd get the audio and I'd just play, stop. Remember, I get obsessed with repetition. And I just started, that's how I was able to retain the information. And then I thought, wait a minute, everything that's in this book, I've already done. I just didn't know how to articulate it. So then I started studying Ed Milet, and I went back to that working on my mindset for 30 minutes to an hour every day. And I started studying Ed Milet. And then I'm like, wait a minute, everything he's talking about, I've already done as well. I just didn't know how to articulate it. And then I said, they're worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I guess I must be worth hundreds of millions of dollars, right? And then all of a sudden, my subconscious mind started to grow, to rise up and align to what I was saying consciously. Because in 2015, I went in front of the whole company and I said, hey, we're going to be this $100 million company. The problem was I didn't believe it. And it wasn't until I got my subconscious mind to align with my conscious mind that all the right people started to show up. And that's why I'm such a big fan of building your identity. It's my life. And so anyway, so that was, so my personal development, and which is why now, my goal at my company right now is I want to create the most 6, 7, and 8-figure a year earners that our industry has ever created. But in order to do that, even though they have all the talent, I got to build their identity. So that's how I hired Erwin McManus here to be our leadership coach for the company. And sure enough, we're on pace to doing $120 million this year, just on the security side. My 2 top guys will make over $5 million this year, so it's already happening. But for me, it's not about the finance. I wanted to make sure that people become better people, right? And yes, we talk a lot about finances, but at our company, we want to give people riches in all areas of their life. You know, that's the faith, the family, the fitness, the finance, the fun.
Well, congratulations on the success this year that you've had.
Thank you.
Yeah, come on, it's awesome.
Phenomenal. I've had the pleasure of getting to sit down with some of your top earners, guys who are genuinely wonderful human beings. Yeah. I was sitting with one of them, I think it was last week actually, and he met you in a similar way. I think he said that he DM'd you and was just like, I found you online and I need to work with you to some degree.
Yeah.
And then to kind of hear his story along the way, and I won't share it too much because I think he's going to join us in the arena at some point. But how have you found talented people like him along the way? Because he was someone who, he wouldn't say he was in a successful point of his life. He was in an interesting season. How did you identify talent?
So great question. So I had to level up myself. And it wasn't until I started working on myself that I started attracting better people. For a long time, I hired sort of the bottom of the barrel people, which is nothing wrong with that because I was the bottom of the barrel people. And I love those. Like, I still have some of our top earners are that. And what I mean by bottom of the barrel people, those are like the people that no one wanted to hire, right? And that was me. So I told you guys at 15 years old, I was shy and I was very timid. I wasn't exaggerating. Like, this is how shy and timid I was. Previous to that job interview, I went on 16 different interviews. No one would hire me because during the interview, I would get so nervous that I would start sweating and I couldn't complete sentences. You've seen me sweat like that one time.
Yeah.
And it still happens to me. And so no one would hire me. So finally my buddy is like, hey, I found this company. They hire anyone. Just show up and they'll hire you. So I was like, cool. So the company was in Santa Fe Springs. So I drive to the company, and sure enough, I'm interviewing. And, well, on the way over there, my car didn't have any air conditioning. So as I got there, I was already hot. And I was just like, shoot, I better not start sweating, right? So during the interview, the person is interviewing me, and 2 minutes later, he's handing me over a paper towel. And I'm thinking to myself, shit, he's noticing that I'm sweating. So what do you think happens? I start sweating even more. And I had this white collar shirt that was just drenched by the end of the interview. And then the guy says to me, sorry, we're not hiring. And this is the call center, right? So I go back to as I'm going back to the car, I stop by the restroom and I start washing my face. And I just start praying to God. I said, God, just give me a shot. I promise you, if you give me a shot, I'll work harder than anybody's ever worked. And I'll always praise your name. And as I walk out of that restroom, there's a gentleman outside. He says, hey, when do you start? I said, I don't start. You guys are full. He says, no, we're not. Who told you that? Like the guy I just interviewed with. He says, come with me, kid. And he says, he takes me to the HR room, and he says, I need this kid to start tomorrow at 3 p.m. Well, that same person is the person that 6 years later helps me start Skyline Security. So I'm a firm believer that in life, people just need a shot. People just need a system. People just need someone who believes in them, that's going to pour into them, that's going to build their identity. And that's what drives me today. Like, the money doesn't drive me anymore. Like, that's just a byproduct of it. But I love that I get to change people's lives, and my platform, like, gives everyone a shot. And it's like I'm reliving my life because I'm seeing their lives change. And I'm seeing them become better people and become a force for good. And it's the best feeling in the world. It's really what gives you fulfillment is that contribution part.
I find your company super fascinating because, one, we have the honor of getting to work with you guys. We've been able to do, over the last year, 4 quarterly sessions where you've flown your team in here, I think 30 or 40 people.
Yes.
And they fly into LA. You do 2 or 3 days with them. We do an all-day, like 8-hour session, 6-hour session with my dad and our team. But I'm always fascinated by how they talk about you. And it's one, you can tell the difference between a culture in a company where they revere the person they work for, or if they are sucking up to the person they work for, or if there's kind of this false illusion of the person they work for. But the people who work for you genuinely love you and genuinely have a lot of admiration for the investment that you've made into them.
Right.
You're not cheap. You're very expensive to work with a team the way that you do like that. Why do you invest in them so much?
Well, it's because I want to build their identity. And I think, a big part of culture, as simple as this sounds, and I think you guys do a great job of this as well, is that at the end of the day, people just want to be seen. And I look at it as the art of honoring people. People want to be seen. People want to know that they matter, and people want to know that they belong. In fact, when I first meet someone, my outcome is that hopefully they like me, but they don't know anything about me because I've spent the whole time talking about them. And for those of you that are shy and timid like I was, or like I am, here's a quick, easy way to do that. When you first meet someone, especially when you're intimidated, because I used to be like that, I'd just be like, hey, tell me your story. And the reason at first I didn't know what I was doing. The reason I said tell me your story is because I didn't want them to ask me questions about me, because I didn't want to sound like I couldn't articulate. So I'm like, I don't want these people asking me questions, because what if I start stumbling, and what if I start sweating? So let me ask them a bunch of questions, right? And what's interesting is what always came out of that is people would always say, hey, what does that guy Edwin do again? Can you invite him again? And I'd always get invited to all these cool spots all the time. And it was really because I spent a lot of my time talking about them, not myself. So, you want to be interested, not interesting.
No, I love that. You haven't mentioned this, but in the last year, you started out of Skyline Security, you started Skyline Solar. Mm-hmm. And one of the chapters in my shift is no one knows what they're doing.
That was me.
And, and then I watched this clip that you did online describing starting the solar company and saying verbatim, without even knowing the chapter was coming out, going, we had no idea what we're doing.
I remember texting you. I'm like, whoa, this is exactly me.
and how many months ago did you start Skyline Solar?
So that was after I started it at the beginning of 2021, and I did it I was desperate again. And the reason I was desperate was because, so the ending of 2020 was the hardest year of my life. And it was because I had the perfect storm happen to me, which was the funding source that I was working with basically says, we're going to pay you $350 less per deal, which if you're doing $20,000 like we were at the time, you could do the math on that. That was all profit gone. And then at the same time, I lost 25% of my sales team to a competitor.
Who is now your friend?
Who is what?
Who is now your friend?
Yes. And then I lost another 25% of my sales team to solar, which is why I had to start a solar company, because if I didn't start a solar company, they were going to keep attacking my sales reps. And then I remember calling my director of finance, and this is the story of my life. I said, hey, man, we need to start a solar company. I don't know how we're going to do it, but you just figure out the operation stuff. I'll go get the sales. I'll go get the influence. And that's how we started it. And then, like, the worst thing that could happen to a company when you're scaling is go from 20,000 down to 8,500 like we did, because the overhead just starts eating you up. And I had to make a decision at that point, which was, do I just cut the staff in half and become profitable again and get used to the kind of money that I like to make? Or do I have faith that I can build it up? And really the mission, the decision came down to, if I would have cut everybody in half or the staff in half, the only guy making money, again, would have been me, and like that thing just doesn't drive me anymore. So I said, I have faith that we're going to rebuild this, and we're going to get it back and going. And then, remember I said there's only two things you can control: your activity and your attitude. And for the next 10 months, I worked 6 days a week, 16-hour days, 18-hour days, picking up the phone call at 11 o'clock. And again, hardest time in my life because we were losing about 50 grand a week, and I wasn't seeing any results. But I already knew that when it takes about 6 months to a year to see the results. And I remember this inner voice telling me, it's not supposed to be easy. Like, you think you're going to be a $1 billion company and this is just going to be a cakewalk? Like, you have to go through this pain. And I just kept continuing to plant seeds, plant seeds, plant seeds, plant seeds. And then all of a sudden, October 2021 came, and that thing just took off like a rocket. And for the last 64 weeks, we've broken every record in the company. The solar company just came in 20th out of 5,000.
You're going to mention that. In Inc. 5,000, your solar company is number 20.
Number 20.
That's pretty amazing.
Out of all the companies, yeah.
Of all the companies.
But, yeah. And now, that struggle sort of, I'm still dealing with stuff there because we grew so fast. But the beauty of that is the security, just, again, I had to go through my biggest disappointments and my biggest resistance before having the biggest triumph, and now we're on a roll. But, again, it's just, whenever that worry comes in, what I've always done is I've just taken massive action towards it. And when every cause has an effect, when you do nothing, you get nothing. So that's why for me, I've always just, whenever I have to go through resistance, I just attack it. It's the only way I know how to do it, is just by attacking it. And I think I've always embraced the suck. I've always embraced hard things because it's in that uncertainty that I know I'm going to grow. It's in that uncertainty where my need for God gets heightened. It's always where it's in those moments that he's always met me. And it's in those moments we've always accomplished some great, great things. And the thing you got to know about those struggles is that if you want to sustain success for a long time, you have to realize that life and pain are inseparable. And the more that you understand that pain is supposed to be a part of life, the more I believe that you can sustain that success. Now, the only way that you can take on pressure and pain is by standing in the pain. See, if you're always running away from the pain, if you're always trying to hide from it, if you're always trying to escape from it, you'll never build the muscles that you'll need when life punches you in the face. And that's why when you're going through that pain, I think you cultivate the three most important skill sets that you need in life, which is grit, fortitude, and resiliency. And those skill sets, no one can take away from you, because it doesn't matter where you go, you're going to succeed because you're used to doing the tough stuff. That's why you don't want your life to be too easy. Because if it's too easy, when life punches you in the face, you won't know what to do and you'll collapse. So the key for me is I've always stood in the pain. I've always just focused on my gifts. And I've always felt like God would always take care of the impossible. The right people will start showing up. As long as I can control what I can control, I push, and it always has worked out. You know, I failed I've lost a lot of battles, but I have yet to lose a war.
I love that. Come on, guys, give it up.
And that's because it's...
Yep. Now, Edwin, we could talk to you all afternoon.
Yep.
But we want to do one last thing before we close. When we named this new global mastermind space, the Arena, I wasn't even thinking about the quote from Theodore Roosevelt. But after Aaron uttered that phrase and we knew that was the right image, someone sent me this quote from Theodore Roosevelt. It says, "Man in the arena, it is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena." And we all know that the man can be a woman.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
That's right. Because sometimes the man in the arena is a woman.
Yes.
But one of the things that Aaron and I wanted to do, and we wanted to make it a part of our culture, is that every year when we do the Arena, and now we know we're going to be doing it every year, we wanted to give someone that we admire, someone who we've seen their lives transformed, someone who exemplifies courage and faith and generosity, who's committed to relationships and values and principles, and is also executing it in such a way that they're effecting great success. And we wanted to give a Man in the Arena award. And Edwin Arroyave, you are the Arena's first Man in the Arena.
Oh, wow.
Let's stand up. And by the way, this is an exact replica, and I did not go buy this. This is mine. Wow. This has been in my back house for the last 3 years. And it is an exact replica of Maximus' helmet from Gladiator. Woo! Because you are an inspiration to all of us, and you remind us that if we stand in the pain, we are undefeated. Would you guys thank Edwin Arroyave?
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Hey guys, if you enjoyed this episode, I want to invite you right now to join the Arena. Go to erwinmcmanus.com/thearena. The link is also in the bio of this episode, and join our online community. The arena has become something really unique and special where we focus on 3 main core values and principles: leadership, communication, and character. Alongside the 20 plus hours of masterclass material, you also gain access to a weekly call and monthly events where we interview and engage with incredible people like Todd Herman and Phil Jones, Edwin Arroyave, Jamie Kern-Lima, and many, many more. The arena is something that is ever expanding and continually growing with a beautiful community online and an annual conference in person in Los Angeles. 2024 has an exciting roster of speakers that we are very much so looking forward to and cannot wait for you to join. So go hit that link and join the community now, and we will see you next week for Mindshift.